For you, when you were drinking, as you mentioned, what you lived on the lake, and that's what people did. Did you find looking back
Mhm.
that there was people enabling the type of behavior that you're engaging in?
I think in our culture, it's enabling. There's a lot of glamorization and social expectations of drinking. Like we should pop bottles, right? We like open champagne and we're all like, woo. But yet, if you can't handle your alcohol, you have a problem, right? So it's like this, you can't win. But I don't know if people were necessarily always enabling me. I think it was just the culture. So like I think that um, if I look back at other people that maybe I could say that they probably had a drinking problem or, and I don't want to say a drinking problem, um, but their relationship with alcohol wasn't going well. Because I mean, I don't know everyone's extent, but I do think, I think we do enable people, but not sometimes purposefully. I think it's a hard fine line because I think a lot of us do know people in our lives that are suffering with alcohol or drug addiction or ourselves. I mean, it's really prevalent, and I think it's really hard because what you're saying too is that potentially, yeah, we might be enabling, but like even if we weren't enabling, would this person still be drinking? Because we don't have that control over somebody else, and I think that's obviously a huge topic in itself. But I don't think anyone's. I think that it was just the culture. Like everybody drank, and I think the problem was is when we try to keep up with people appearances and what we're supposed to do it's hard because not everybody can drink the same. Not everybody, you know, but again, what you're saying too is that you might have been binge drinking too. That's what we were doing. We were binge drinking. So it was like, I don't know if people were necessarily enabling, but we were all doing unhealthy drinking at the end of the day. Binge drinking is not healthy. And a lot of people don't admit either that they feel like they have a problem. So, and it's hard because, yeah, sometimes people go to an extreme, but like, how do you address it, right? Like, especially if you're part of the extreme. So it's kind of I think it's all very sticky. It's a sticky topic. And we don't, in our culture, again, we don't talk enough about the real downfalls. Like, we talk more about the excitement of alcohol versus the really reality of the next day. Or your friend gets in a bush and everyone's laughing, but really it's like sad as hell, right? Like, it's sad.
It is, it is. It's like because you get this visual, right? And when you stop, and forgive me for those who are watching, when you see the visual, it is funny in a way, right? Because no one is passed out in a good looking way. Like no one's passed out in like a GQ model pose, right? It's usually you're at your ugliest, it's usually at your messiest. You're very vulnerable in a sense. And I look at alcohol and I remember, and you and I look like we're around the same age. I remember the commercials being so upbeat, being so incentivized, right? Like, especially, like, I'm going to take it from a male's perspective, right? From a man's perspective. I remember the commercials, whereas you get alcohol, and a few minutes later, the most attractive girl in the room is on your arm, right? Like, everyone around you
Yep.
is having, you remember that? I remember that, right?
Mhm.
So it's like, if I was young and impressionable at that time, which I was, I can see why so many people my age were falling to it because as a man, like I didn't have women that wanted me or I wasn't dating women that looked like that in the commercial, right? So I'm like, okay, you know what? I have a beer of this or I have a shot of this. The most attractive girls going to be around me. You look at like when you go to clubs and bars, what's one of the incentives for you to get the VIP booth? You have to buy bottle service, right? So it paints this image that alcohol is so attractive because everyone around you becomes attractive. But then you mentioned the dark side and you mentioned the culture. And I want to get your perspective. How much of an impact do you think the culture of drinking has on people?
Oh my gosh, it's astounding. And I'll give you some examples and also share a little bit of my journey about what was really hard for me when I stopped drinking. This is part of it. So, the glamorization, like what you were saying, and the romanticizing of alcohol, pairing it with social status. Like, look at Sex in the City. They're drinking like their Cosmos, like having like fancy shoes, and like it's like this warped world of like this is what classy people do. However, the problem with it is that it goes into our subconscious. So my son, who's going to be 10, he went on a vacation. I didn't drink, but everyone around us, like a lot of people I was with, drank. And he told me, he goes, when I'm 21, I'm going to drink. And it's not because like he knows that alcohol is addicting, right? Because he hasn't been exposed to the addicting nature of alcohol, but it looks really freaking fun. And the problem is that we don't know what's fun and what's not fun without alcohol. We think alcohol brings the party. We think it's exciting. It's what you do as an adult. It's like that exciting thing. When I turn 21, I get to drink. And so if we see this over and over again, like ads, like the subliminal message about, like the banana and the vodka only has this many calories, When you see that over and over and over again, it goes into your subconscious. What does that mean? It doesn't become a conscious thought. Think about driving. We don't think about driving because it's now in our subconscious. That same thing happens with alcohol. So you think it's helping you sometimes having this perceived benefit. It's alluring. So when we stop drinking or when you're still drinking, you can't fathom having like a life without alcohol. It seems very difficult. So if you've been drinking for 20 plus years, it's also addicting. Number one, it's extremely addicting. It's really weird when people remove alcohol because it's like, how am I supposed to function? And it's a normal thought because you've been programmed. So this is the issue when things aren't talked about is that people are like, aren't sober people boring? I used to think that, and no one directly told me sober people were boring. Somehow in my brain, that is what I thought. And again, like in my son's when he was younger in the children's movie, they had mice drinking wine. So like it showed to children that that's like a normal part of being an adult, and that's fancy. It's fancy to have an expensive glass of wine. And over time, again, that gets implanted in your brain. And then you're like, okay, well, that's what we're supposed to do. So when people talk about removing alcohol, one thing that's difficult for people, one, not all, is the fact that your social expectations. Who are you without alcohol? What are you going to do on vacation now that you don't drink? You don't celebrate on vacation anymore because that's a part of it. And so this gets ingrained. And if you're like me, now this was a little bit ago, like I just didn't think I had to stop drinking. I thought like only bad people did. Because again, those were things that I knew about. What do we hear about? Oh, people that have severe alcohol problems are homeless or they're on the streets. You can be very functional, have a master's degree, have a full-time job, raise a family, and have a problem with alcohol. It's a myth that you have to be rock bottom. And I hope you don't go rock bottom because surely that's not going to be a good place to be. So that's kind of my thoughts on that is that unless we start telling the truth about what the real effects of alcohol, people unfortunately don't know. And so your comment about enabling, it's not necessarily that we're enabling people. We don't sometimes actually know any better because we've never been taught any better.